Welcome to Generation AI, the podcast where we demystify artificial intelligence in the world of higher education. I'm your host, Ardis Kadiu, joined by my insightful co-host, JC Bonilla. Hey, JC.
Hi, everybody. Good morning, Ardis. My friend Ardis calling us from LA at we speak. So 9:30 New York time. I don't know, 2 in the morning for you. It's like what 6:30. Everybody, I wish you could see this picture. It's like nicely showered, ready to go. Like at 6:30, JC, I'm a hot mess. PJs. I just woke up. I still have the voice. This guy's been around. It's been up for quite some hours. So good morning, artists. Great to see you early in the morning. More importantly, we just spent 2 days together, which we haven't done in a long, long time. So I got in a lot of artist time this week. So how's your JC time this week, artist?
It was great. It's always good hanging out with you, besides this podcast. So I kind of miss it when we were working together at Element. So this is, it was good. It was a really good time.
Oh, artist and I, as you know, we go back, and it's always good to see a friend, a colleague, someone that you have flow and you can catch up work, or you basically show pictures of how my kids have grown.
Exactly.
And everybody, I saw artists and my friend artist needs a big vacation. So every next time you see him, ask him, "Hey, JC told me that I need to nudge you on your next vacation." So everybody, where is artist going on vacation with the family next? That's the question we all should be listening, and that's how we're going to be testing if you're paying attention. Artists, we saw ourselves at the University of Georgia System AI Summit, probably the first in kind where all vendors and technology experts come together and commingle with leaders in the university system of Georgia. And it was a fantastic couple of days. We actually did a podcast there, which is going to be hitting, already has hit our listeners soon. But now you're in a different travel experience. So you're in LA, doing slightly different. So from an AI vibe, if I could prime this question, what we did at the early of the week was a true honest interest on leadership to understand where AI is, historically where it comes from and how it could be used. Now, fast forward to LA. Oh, and by the way, before we do that, and experts kind of feeding in the blanks of the possible, the art of the possible, and what is not, demystifying AI, if you will, but a true interest from the leaders. What about NACAC? The leaders of enrollment management and admission, specifically undergraduate, right? Is AI a topic? Like, what's the vibe of AI there? Spill the beans.
It's interesting. So we're at the National Association of College Admissions Counselors here in LA. It's one of the biggest admissions conferences of the year, with 5,000 plus, representatives from companies, from colleges, from high schools. So they all come together every year. If you're not familiar with it, but essentially, a lot of the sessions, there's very few AI sessions. Even the AI sessions, they're very high level. There's really not a lot of depth or interest, meaning interesting content. Very, very superficial. Folks that just put the AI, in some cases, they just put the AI name in there just so they can get some more people to attend.
It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy when that happens.
Yeah, the content is just like, everybody that I talk to, they're like, no one has said yet that they attended a really, really interesting session. They all said, I could have walked out of there in 10 minutes. I could have walked out of there in 30 minutes. The one interesting thing that is happening is actually NACAC has what they call special interest groups. So they have this, well, they don't call them committees, but they're essentially special interest groups. And they formed a AI special interest group. So that was an interesting one, where they had their first meeting during this NACAC, and now they have a special interest group on AI, which is a path forward, and it's a way to kind of continue that conversation.
So it's happening in baby steps, or not at the speed that you would like. I would say it's happening in its natural form for NACAC that has multiple important angles to manage, being the politician here. Go NACAC, get onto the wave of AI. It's really, really important unlock for all things enrollment, higher education, and student experience. Artists, the past 2-3 weeks have been very hot on one of the new developments on actually not new developments at all. It's something we're going to be talking about. It's been very hot around agents, AI agents, something that has been around for quite some time, right? And as many things in AI, they get repurposed, rebranded, a new model comes in, so it kind of gives it a new life. So what we want to do in the next half hour or so, it's give our listeners a presentation, a recap of what AI agents are, where they come from, and more importantly, how these agents slash assistants, right, become one of the promises that we see unlock AI as an application delivery and as adoption in the different units, enterprises that we have. Moreover, in this, I'm going to paraphrase and tell me if I'm wrong. In Ardis' terminology, it is an agent, right, that it's so important that you are building agents, right, and kind of assistants, plural, right, in Element as a core function throughout the product, right? So is that right? Agents coming all over Element, and why is this so important from your point of view?
Yeah, no, agents are kind of the next iteration. So when we talked last time during, well, not last time, but we talked about this idea of the 5 stages of AI and the capabilities of that. And the next stage that gets unlocked as these models get better is this agentic type of workflows that happen with AI. So agents are very important because essentially, rather than just this one-shot components of LLMs and the power of LLMs, moving to agents means that you can package full workflows or full pieces of work into what you would call an agent. In traditional terms, that would be a module, a piece of functionality, or it would be even a software delivery package that you deliver, and that's a workflow. Now you call those agents.
So let's define it. An agent is an autonomous intelligent system. That's a lot of words. Autonomous means it works by itself, right? It has some type of free will, to scare some of our listeners with words that we don't like. Intelligent in the sense that has a higher level of sophistication. So it just basically, in terms of actions and its autonomy, has a level of intelligence, sophistication, and it's a system, meaning it's just basically not one thing. It's a combination of input, output, and it requires all those type of things. So, moreover, it's really, really important for people to understand that this intelligence, autonomous, and systematic approach needs to perceive an environment to make decisions and take an action. So, this idea is that it's built autonomously, intelligent in a part of a system to make an action, but it requires an environment. So if anything, an assistant or an AI agent without their environment, it's useless. And this is what makes it so interesting, because some of the things that we've been covering in the podcast, with even your awesome session at the AI Summit, is that there's a tech stack that allows these environments, the context, the inputs to these agents to be so rich. So the guardrails artists are so interesting that you can allow an agent to do multiple things, but also don't go crazy and decide to do things that are apocalyptic in nature, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the naming convention is a little bit so you're going to hear this name agents quite a bit today, and there's the actual definition of what an agent that JC just mentioned, the traditional definition of an agent, which is autonomous and does things on its own, basically has agency, right? That's the whole world. It has agency to take actions and do things on its own, hence the name. However, today, for marketing purposes, there's a lot of folks who are using agent as just a workflow that is happening in the background, right? And a workflow that it doesn't have to be autonomous. It can be triggered by a human. It can be triggered by an incoming message from a user or an input from a user. So it's a lot more simplified than the traditional wording of an agent. So it doesn't have to be autonomous. It can be reactive, so to speak, right, rather than proactive.
And this is such a big thing that in the recent 2 weeks, two of our big competitors, HubSpot and Salesforce, have gone all in on agents, and they have their own branding and experience. So I think HubSpot calls it agent.ai. Salesforce calls it, what is it called? Force Agent?
Agent Force.
Agent
So
Force.
yeah, there's There's a lot to unpack on those
Right,
both.
right, right.
Yes.
And then within those CRMs, Element has its own. What is the agent for Element? Do we have a name for it yet?
So we call them AI assistants, Bolt AI assistants.
And then you see Microsoft, Workday, ServiceNow, and many other organizations basically unpacking their applications, branding their agents or assistants into some type of product, right? Artists. So this is front and center. Organizations are making the shift to productized agents or assistants, and it's a really important top of mind for everyone following AI. So let's do a little bit of recap historically. As I said before, these things sometimes everyone know they've been around. In this case of an agent, we start seeing these first manifestations, right, in the 50s, 1950s. And you were telling me this, that the first assistant AI agent type of chatbot, its name was ELIZA or ELIZA. I don't know, how do you pronounce that? Is with a Z? ELIZA?
ELIZA, yeah.
ELIZA. Much better names than ChatGPT or Gemini or things like that. And there was also another one called Dentrel, which was an expert system. And they probably have very light applications or neural nets as we see them today. And if anything, that's been the biggest change. The neural nets, the things that power these assistants, have gotten so much better and sophisticated. Therefore, the system and the intelligence, 17 degrees. But they function like chatbots, right? So you were telling me about ELIZA, that it was kind of therapeutic in nature.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So ELIZA was essentially reflecting back to you your questions and your emotions, right?
Like a consultant.
I think like a consultant, exactly.
Consultants
exactly.
out there. I'm just a joke. It's just a joke.
Well, how do you feel about that? Or, yeah, I understand. That can make you feel very angry.
By the 70s and the 2000s, there's obviously an expansion of productivity, right? Because this is where we start seeing machine learning, even introductions to really primitive and early natural language processing, which we will call text mining, right? And then you start seeing the autonomous aspects kind of proliferate, right? But it's really the 2000s artists that become really interesting. And this is where I want everybody to start thinking about these AI agents or assistants as manifestations of Siri, Alexa, Google Assist, right? And how we start interacting with these autonomous intelligence systems in products that we already see, right? I think Alexa screamed at her 3 times this morning, and Siri, literally spoke to her and she didn't understand me. I was very disappointed that Siri sometimes just, I have a love-hate relationship with Siri. Alexa, it's just basically abusive. I don't know. What's happening in your life with agents, Ardis? Are you using agents today besides building agents for your partners? Do you have anyone that you're already using that you brand and present?
No, I mean, the day-to-day agents are really, they're not really agents in the sense that they're assistants. Google Assistants, for example, they even branded their name Google Assistants. But Alexa and Siri are the main ones that we're talking about in a conversational way. There are other agents, JC, that we kind of interact with quite a bit, but they're systems underneath some of the work that we do, right? So we're going to see more and more of these. But in my daily life, I tend to go directly to a lot of the LLM components. So I'm not relating, I'm not interacting too much with the agentic components of some of the companies.
Do you spend time with Siri or Alexa? None?
Less and less. Basically, I just very, very few. Yeah. The capabilities are a lot lower there now.
As we are recording this week, at the beginning of the week, so now it's a Friday, I think it was on Tuesday, OpenAI released its voice LLM, right? And allowing truly discourse the way we talk to Alexa and Siri, right?
Right.
To be now as a capability, right? And it's really interesting.
Do you have that?
I don't have it yet. I got the demo while we were at the session, and it was super fun, right? Because the things that I've really liked is the way you got demo artists. It's the presenter is Portuguese. He's Brazilian actually. And he was saying, all right, let me do this. And he would speak in Brazilian or Portuguese. And then he would say it in English, right? And it will go the back and forth just to basically demonstrate the bilingual, multilingual capabilities that he has. And of course, he behaves like a GPT or to your point, that LLM behind the scenes. So on the autonomous, I don't think much things change. Is the intelligent and the systems that are just basically next level, obviously, because the tech stack that is powering those things. So, artists, let's just go a little bit deeper onto what an agent, a modern agent looks like. And one of the things that you just presented is like, okay, JC, yeah, there's these agents, right? But Siri and Alexa, I'm not spending a lot of time with them because half of us hate them. I just told you, I have an abusive relationship with Alexa. I scream at it. Why? Because he never understands it. It never gets the right song. I just asked her to deploy the Roomba, and it didn't work. Siri, I mean, it's so weird, right? But anyway, many of us don't love these current deployments that we have on these AI agents. However, it's becoming so much better that again, Element and Salesforce and HubSpot and many other companies are going all in. So, what makes a modern AI agent basically tick and be sophisticated? So it's not this type of 1950s ELIZA, Alexa configurations that we love or hate. So we know that in terms of the key characteristics are autonomies, perception, reactivity, reasoning. We spoke about that, learning and communication. Again, there's 6 components that make an agent, AI agent, modern. It's autonomy, its ability to perceive the environment, its reactivity in terms of speed and computational power, its reasoning. We've been talking about that. It's so important. Of course, it's learning over time and performance, and the communication, which also can be multimodal and whatnot. What can you say about these components and key characteristics, artists?
Yeah. So, if we start from autonomy, AI agents can really operate independently, meaning that you don't have to tell it every single step that it needs to take, and there's no human in the loop, or there can be human on the loop, for example, when you can observe it, but it can take a lot of those actions independently without constant human intervention. The idea of perception is that as it takes this action, it's constantly getting data, or it's constantly getting inputs, or gathering information about that particular task or that particular environment that it's operating in, and it's making decisions for what to do next and next and next, or how to kind of complete that task. The idea of the reactivity, what you mentioned, is there's two components to this, and this is where a lot of companies, like, that's where the marketing shift happens a little bit. The reactivity is around, they can be reactive, meaning that they can take an input and then spring to life and then do something, or they can be proactive, meaning that they internally assess their environment and then respond accordingly. So the proactive assistants are a lot harder to do, and we're not going to see a lot of them happening, or the next wave is going to be proactive. Where we are today is reactive. The reasoning and decision making, this is super important because this is the brain of these agents and these systems, is the reasoning capabilities of this LLM. They need it, right? They need reasoning, they need decision making. So they analyze this data and they make decisions. So and large language models are the perfect, that's what happened with the unlock here, is this LLMs becoming so powerful that they can reason now, and with O1 becoming more, processing a lot and becoming more kind of doing all the reasoning behind the scenes, they unlock another level of this agent's understanding of making a little bit more. The idea of learning is very important because that's the context part, right? It's like, how do you incorporate more and more context? And that's the learning. I did all these different steps. Here's the reasoning for why I did this. Now, what's the next more possible step to do something else?
In artists, the unlocks that we've been seeing on learning, it's that the more learning capability, right? So the performance improves, right? And there's this idea of learning and performance that go hand to hand that we've been seeing in the past year, right? So the more learning I can do, the bigger data training I use, the better I become. So performance over time and learning also going together.
Right. Well, I also going to say on terms of the learning, it's the context window that you have in terms of how much data, how much learning can you put in there to complete, to have in your head right? Because when you learn, you're storing all this information and then you're able to make reasoning better from something else. And then the last one is the communication part, right? Which is how do they communicate? Of course, we know that conversational interfaces are the best way to communicate with humans. And but these agents, need communication with other systems as well, and that's what really makes it really powerful. Is that there are pieces of workflow functionality that can communicate with other systems to do work. They use tools, they use different techniques to do work, and then they communicate with humans conversationally. That can be through voice, they can be through text, they can be through video, and so on and so forth.
Artists on communication, you and I had a conversation on communication on Monday, where we basically having this reaction to prompt and conversations with sophisticated LLMs today are prompt based, right? And then it's called prompt engineering, which is super important as a skill to have today. But we both see that there's a gigantic opportunity for UX and UI to basically redefine how we communicate with these assistants. Very, very similar, circa to like 1980s, right? When you and I are learning computers, right? We communicate with them via prompts, right? So DOS and whatnot. So think about how the evolution of a computer looks like. Question in reaction to you. It is fascinating that OpenAI decides to do their next phase of conversations, voice, right? Following Lexus, I like type of thing. What's your take on that as a technology strategist, right? You can create any type of interface or conversational interface for your technology element. And someone like OpenAI, they decide to not do that. Maybe they're working behind the scenes, but what they release, it's a voice communication feature. What's your take on that?
I think it's just natural, right? So it's a conversational interface. You start with text because it's the easiest way to
Computationally easier, right?
computationally easy, exactly. But then as the models move towards what they call what we call multimodal, meaning that they understand and speak, and they have all the different senses. They understand text, they understand video, they understand images, they understand voice. As they move in that direction, it only makes sense that voice is the next highest bandwidth. If you think about bandwidth of communication, text has a low bandwidth of communication. Voice has a higher bandwidth of communication, and then video is even higher. And then face to face on in person kind of a 3D environment is the last highest level of communication bandwidth that you need. Of course, we're going to move to voice because voice has a lot of interesting components to it that you can't convey with just text, right? And it makes the systems a lot more human-like, and of course, that's kind of what we're moving towards. It's like we want them to think like us, we want them to model like us, and then communicate with the world and engage and connect very similarly to the workflows that we do or to us in a very familiar way via of course, as human voices.
Right. And if the components of modern AI kind of allow you to be autonomous, good in perception, reaction, reasoning, learning, and communication, and artists kind of just gave us those breakdowns, let's just start giving examples of what this looks like in practice. So some of the research that we've done for autonomous agents or AI agents, Salesforce, right, with their current release in Agent Force, it's a good example of how their AI agents, presumably, right, because we haven't seen it in action, will function to substitute a customer service staff, like literally probably targeting these over the phone, taking kind of call centers, or a form comes in that workflow, and they will be autonomous. Why? Because they make decisions and they act based on the available data. They will have to reason to make multiple tasks. For example, would you like to be transferred to a booking agent? And the booking agent is also an AI, right? And then I book you. Can you confirm where's your credit card? And that whole flow, right? Why? Because they are personalizing along existing business applications. I need you to come and see my product, airline, hotel, whatever, and need to buy it, reserve, and actually pay with a credit card.
What's really important about this is very, very important, JC, is we're talking about agents today, but all of these companies, including Salesforce, they're doing a hard pivot of their software into a different way of delivering applications and software and functionality. And they're calling them agents, right? So that should really be the main thing that you take out of this episode is software is transitioning from pieces of functionality and UI that you get on your you get a new tab on your screen or in your application to now moving towards agentic systems and this world of agents where things are getting delivered via this functionality. So Salesforce has made this hard pivot because they see the future being interactions with natural conversational interfaces, with voice, audio, text, and so on and so forth. And the benefit that they have is they already have the underlying data and the underlying tools that can communicate to these other different systems, and they're putting these agents on top of that. So huge unlocks there. They're trying to disrupt themselves, of course, but also the whole industry is moving in that direction. We've been talking about this now for the past year or so in terms of Element and how we're focusing on it, but super important to kind of think about what are the different unlocks that JC just mentions in every vertical, right? Customer success and customer support is number one area where these agents can be very, very successful because the task that a customer is asking for help on can be a number of different things. It can be just providing some information on their account. It can be providing some help text or how to do something to being a little bit more complex and connecting kind of a couple of different workflows together, like JC just mentioned. The example that they gave at Dreamforce was around calling Saks. I think it was Saks Fifth Avenue, and not I'm needing to return a shirt. They didn't have the shirt in stock, so they hand it off to a different agent to take a look at the stock and then deciding to mail it to them, but they didn't have how much, if they could actually mail it because it wasn't connected to the shipping module or provider. So they connected to that provider. It got the rate and it said, okay, I can actually ship this to you in 2 days and it's going to be in your front door now in 2 days because it did all those interactions and all of that connection in the background. So that's what we're talking about now. A human agent would have done the same thing and gone to all these different systems, put the pieces together and kind of responded. But this was all AI kind of connecting all those pieces together.
And Ardis, I'd like to leave everybody with a 201 of what you just mentioned, right? So if an agent allows you to go to that flow, right, and in a way of personalize a business application through autonomous intelligent systems and repeating workflows and whatnot, there's this thing called multi-agent systems, which in a way
Yes.
is basically are creating permutations of these agents that will come and work together to tackle even more complex tasks, right? So the idea is that there's agents that collaborate for efficiency. They have the incentive and the problem solving capabilities go through the roof, right? I'd love for you to riff on an example because this is where Element is, in my opinion, thriving, right? So you're creating assistants, plural, and they are collaborating. And you got kind of giving these examples of how I can move someone through different workflows. And I could have the scheduler, the counselor, the planner, the multiple things, and they all come together and these multi-edges are collaborating. So how are you doing this in Element? And kind of, can you paint the picture of what is a multi-agent and this kind of complexity and how you can have this orchestration, if you will?
So when you deliver pieces of software, we talk about software having these boundaries and having APIs that are communicating with other software to get stuff done. So you don't build this monolithic pieces of software and say, I handle every piece of functionality. Usually you build it in a modular way where you can add a piece of functionality to the system and say, now there locks a new workflow that you're doing. So let's say you have a communication system and it only sends emails out. Now you add a new piece of functionality, it sends SMSs out, or it can write SMS messages. Or you have a piece of functionality, let's say in admissions, where you can review applications. Now you add a new piece of functionality where that same system can actually evaluate transcripts and so on and so forth. So it's the same thing with agents, and how we think about it is that different agents need to understand and have a very vertical kind of understanding of their jobs to be done.
What do you mean with vertical, Ardis?
Well, by vertical, I mean essentially the idea of these jobs to be done. They're specifically
Guardrails, boundaries, and
guardrails.
depth.
There we go. Yeah. So I'm making
Is the right word. It's just that I think the vertical it implies this important thing you just mentioned. So anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah. Yeah, it has the guardrails, right? Exactly. It has the guardrails. And it's a lot easier to reason about what the functionality is of that particular agent. So when things go wrong and how you can troubleshoot it and how you can kind of put pieces together, it's so much easier for us. What we have found is to kind of limit it to the scope of a particular boundaries. And then what ends up happening is that these agents need to communicate with others in order to move data back and forth, to collaborate on a particular task that can require different specialties or expertise. So that's how we think about it. So the agents has this particular expertise. It has access and defined boundaries to access certain data. It's also very, very good to do this because then you can think about security in a better way. You can think about data access in a better way and governance. So you can have agents then be scoped out for specific data access that they have. And then if they don't have access to something, they can hand it off to another agent. So you have a lot of benefits that come out by having a multi-agent system. So these experts or agents can now collaborate with each other, just like we have application human APIs today that they have different pieces of software communicate with each other. These agents will have also interfaces that they're moving around and moving data and pieces of functionality around. And we're going to be able to add more and more. So what we've done at Element is exactly that, is that we do not have one massive AI chatbot or AI assistant to handle everything. We have different assistants that or pieces or agents actually rather underneath that can communicate. One of them can be a writer, it can write really well. Another one can be a reasoner around the communication plan. Another one can be a great advisor because it understands the course catalog, for example, and it knows how to interpret that data, and it understands the connections between the different courses. So that's the world that we're building right now with AI assistants slash agents, right? So we're using these words interchangeably right now.
Let's go into applications, right? And let's start with higher education enrollment. First application, it's orientation, new student orientation, day one, right? So typical scenario that I want to give everybody, which is happening today. Yes, it is happening today. It's 2024. AI has all these autonomous capabilities, and many of your new student orientation will look like this. Balloons outside, welcoming the student and the family, a slip given to her, let's call her Stephanie, which says, you have to go see these 5 people today. One of them is student affairs, the other one is a financial aid advisor, there was an academic advisor, and the other one, it's like a student affairs kind of clubs and whatnot. So I go and I check in with the first one. There's no flow. It just says I have to do those 5. And then the financial aid person tags, okay, I've seen you. Right now, you can give this to your academic advisor. The academic advisor comes and says, you know what? You don't have the transcripts. So I need to go back to the registers. And all of a sudden, like the thing with the academic advising didn't take place. And Stephanie needs to add one more checkpoint. She goes to the registers, gets a transcript, comes back to the academic affairs, registered all those important things, comes out. I got classes. I know how to pay for it. Let me start doing the socializing aspect. Means the student affairs gets into canoeing trip, chess club, and I don't know, movie nights on Thursdays, which is basically her jam. And then finally, she goes into the cafeteria and does a tour of the facilities. That is a typical new student orientation today. Obviously, not as sophisticated as the ones that you all do. What I wanted to showcase is the manual interaction of workflow through experts and assistants, and how sometimes there's a break in disruption. So, Ardis, how do you orchestrate that under the lens of multi AI agent systems?
Oh boy.
In 45 seconds. No, but let's start with, yeah, how do you do that? And more importantly, this is doable today, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is doable, and a lot of the things that you mentioned, JC, are information that the student needs at each one of these interaction points. They need advice and information and what to do. And that information is locked into the experts of this particular jobs, like advising and financial aid and so on and so forth. So we assume that those are experts in that specific task or specific area. AI agents can access huge knowledge bases, and they can provide that same type of information to that student without having to go physically from place to place in order to engage with them and interact with them. It also has this idea of context and knowledge of the student. It knows exactly who that student is at every kind of moment in time. So all the history of interactions is not lost and it's captured automatically. Whereas, as we know, humans are really, really bad at entering their communications and their interactions face to face with in the CRM. It's like we can say we like, well, I have a conversation with this person. It's like, is the data and kind of the in the CRM? It's like, well, no, I didn't enter it yet. So we usually forget, and we have to regurgitate all of the information over and over again to different people as we're having this face-to-face interaction because we're really bad at documenting and keeping track of that stuff. Whereas if we working with a digital agent, it becomes a lot easier for your information to be passed on to the next one, to the next one, and it has all the context and you don't have to repeat yourself and you can get that history in there. So high level, I would say those are some of the benefits that an AI agent can bring to the table, but we can certainly break it down even more. But I feel like we have a couple more ones to go through.
In artists, an important aspect of the breaking down is that not only is doable, but I think for everyone to leave with is that it's not that you create an agent called a financial aid advisor, right? And it's an end state. Is that to create that orchestration, the agent needs to be taught how do I ask questions, right? So there's an agent called the asking questions, right? There's an agent that is basically looking at student data, to your point, right? There's an agent that it's within data, secure data, right? Because I need FAFSA filing. So you create within student data, there's privileged, high access kind of personal data that, will be another orchestration, another agent, and so on and so forth. So you can start seeing is that, oh, all the routines administratively, financial aid, academic, whatever, they are broken up in each of these functions that an advisor would do 55, they're agents, right? And then the same, hey, I'm going to ask you a question of who you are, right? It's the same agent. You can use it for financial aid, you can use it for the registrar's office, and so on and so forth. So you have that kind of multi-agent, and that's where the orchestration comes in. All right. Let's give similar an example. Let's go to marketing, right? So a typical repetitive nature, right? So is I need to basically do a campaign, but the campaign needs to be personalized. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to create some type of segmentation of who the audience is. Then I need to have some type of messaging library that these are basically the things that I need to do. And there's a content strategy on Medium, right? And then I press the button, which is basically I'm going to create a campaign, or I draw it, I do the emails. So we're thinking about a campaign kind of setup from soup to nuts. That requires a marketing professional. So let's riff. Is that doable? The orchestration of multi-agents, can it come and support marketing and artists? Let's expand this with human in the loop. Why? Because everyone is going to be thinking, well, now you're saying that marketing can be replaced. No. What we're saying is how these agents come and collaborate. So can we just riff on a marketing campaign needs to be done, and some of the things that go in place is the messaging strategy, the segmentation strategy, the medium strategy, and of course the execution aspect. With, now let's add a fifth one, brand safety, like checks that allow a human to come into that part. How would you orchestrate that a little bit?
Well, so from an agentic system perspective, like, and this is what we actually done this in Element, is there is a few things that we need to understand first. The first thing is just like an expert. So these systems are not operating in kind of a vacuum. They're modeled after actual, human workflows and work. So when you're putting a campaign together, there are certain things that you need to understand and need to know. If somebody comes into your desk and you're a marketing expert, a marketing director, whatever, you need to understand. It's like, I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to say, what's the target audience that you're trying to reach, JC? What is the goal of your campaign? What is some of the messaging that you want to convey? And then what is the call to action that you want to do for these people to take? So there's a lot of those pieces of components. What's the time horizon that you want this campaign to be over? Is it time constrained? Do you have to nudge people along over a couple of days, or is it going to be over 30 weeks or so? So those pieces of information are super important to get as input. So that's the human in the loop part, right? That's when you as the human need to provide that context in order for these agents to actually go back and kind of start planning and doing things.
And artists, these things are hard coded, right? Within the agent, you will say, do all
Yes.
these things by yourself, autonomous, right? And as part of your system, your workflow, get input from a human artist and whomever, and they actually are trained or designed to push that, and they can move forward on this, right? So
Correct. Exactly. And the more context they have, the better. So think about it as, again, we go back to software. It's like, how are you modeling the app to software? You have to have some inputs for the software in order for it to be customized and to be, to generate something new. So in this case, that's how it generates brand new stuff for every single time, is asking, and it needs these types of inputs, because the same agent can generate a campaign for a, upcoming event series that's happening on campus, a lecture series. It can also generate a campaign for an admissions application push. You can also generate a campaign for an alumni, event that's happening. So it can generate these different things, but it needs that input from the humans. So let's take it step by step, right? What ends up happening is this. You provide these pieces of information that it needs: the direction, the audience. In some cases, the audience can be in like, it needs to understand the audience, because the messaging is going to be very different for different audiences. So that's the part of it. So you grabs all that information and then you start putting together a plan, right? It starts the reasoning. So that's the higher level assistant can be that campaign manager, so to speak, and it started putting together a plan.
just where to give colors to that, this is where I start seeing, I have human who identifies as a man, interested in engineering, but he comes from abroad, and 17 other data points in that context, and that is basically where starts reasoning, and woof, it gives a content recommendation, right? That probably is going to move in your orchestration, as opposed to artists. Oh, this is how I've done my content campaign, right? My copy from last year. And many of us, because we're humans, and that's basically, I'm going to grab that and then I'm going to update it, as opposed to from scratch and highly tailor to the audience. So the strategy, if anything, for marketing, I think is more nuanced and promising.
Yeah. Well, I can give you two scenarios, right? So you mentioned, how do you build a marketing campaign, and then rather than just building one marketing campaign, it's like, how do you build and nudge people along towards a particular goal, right? So those are very different things. When we think about a campaign, we think there's going to be a lot of assets that get created. There's going to be
Call to
orchestration that
action.
happens between. Right, exactly. Right. So we have that today, right? We humans build these communications and they kind of put them into a campaign, and there's multi touch points in there and so on and so forth. But it's static. It has to be built and then it gets deployed. Our AIs today, our AI agents, they can do that. They can write, they can reason about what are the different steps, they can, or the different sequences, they can write those sequences because they use different AI agents, and so on and so forth, and then deploy them into the tool itself. They can write the HTML and deploy them. Now, that's the current state today, right? Where we're moving that's the first part. That's the reactive components or reactive agents. We're moving is proactive agents. So the same campaign, but now you tell it, here's a goal, but you know what? I don't need to tell you what the audience is. I'm going to give you a segment, and then you're going to essentially build a real time campaign for every user in that segment. So rather than building one campaign, you're going to dynamically build campaigns for each one of those people. And by the way, you're going to build it in real time as you get data.
which the data could have data points, updates to the record on
Exactly.
from 2 seconds ago, yesterday, and
Yeah.
that static behavior that we have, in a way, misses the opportunity to react to recency in our students, consumers, and whatnot. And artists, just to be clear, what you're talking about can be done by a human. Of course, I can come and do one thing, one specialized campaign, and probably it's going to be much better than the computer, right? It will take us 5 years to do 1,000 students versus it would take you 5 seconds to do 100,000 students with this type of new advances that we have in technology.
Yeah, that's the unlock there for sure.
So we can keep on going here. There's tons of applications of multi-agent systems that can be deployed in traffic management systems, smart cities, logistics, healthcare, you name it, right? This is the kind of thing that we will need tons of time to come and unpack. But the message that we have for everybody today, it's that agents, assistants, right, where the autonomous and intelligence aspect of LLMs really have a fascinating promise. Why? Because it allows us to mimic business flow and business applications at scale. The example that you just gave, right? And to your point, not one organization, many organizations are turning their strategic playbooks towards it's all about agents. By the way, big shout out to you, Ardis. You've been doing this for longer than a week. You've been doing this for since the AI thing started 2 years ago. So just call out that you saw this and you're really ahead of the curve. And that's why the product is so interesting. Anyway, so these agents provide this capability, but the fascinating thing is that they could be multi-agents and they required that orchestration. And this is where the nuance, if you will, of product in the AI becomes good or just basically mind-blowing when the orchestration, it's so mimicking how we do work administratively, admissions and whatnot. And also, in my opinion, how it contextualizes the work, right? Because I can have an agent for phone calls, right? And is a orchestrating telemarketing. But we know that telemarketing for higher education is not the same thing as telemarketing for K-12. And just imagine the generic products, the generic multimodal, multi-agent delivery, right, and orchestration versus super custom, right? And that's where it becomes super interesting. Ardis, what do you think? You like the episode today? Any words of wisdom as we check out and you go back to, I don't know, beautiful things in sunny California?
The only thing I want to leave everybody with is this kind of mental unlock that a lot of folks have around agents right now. Nothing changes in the background, but just how we talk about them and how we talk about AI, we should be very careful in how we communicate these things out. One of the main ways that we're trying to communicate it, and we've seen a good reaction, is if you're mentioning this AI assistants or agents as teammates. They're not there to replace your job. They're not there to take over the things that you do. They're just another teammate. Think about how do you expand an organization or organization's capabilities is through adding more headcount. Well, now those headcount don't have to be humans. They can be a teammate that you can interact with and you communicate with in order to get work done. So think about these as teammates rather than, of course, we move through the co-pilot phase or the assistance phase because they're not really assistants in that sense. They're more like teammates that they're doing work, beside you.
AI and us are here to expand support, not replace. And I'm glad you bring this up, right? Because this conversation can quickly go into what are these two dudes telling us. Everybody, enjoy the time. Artists have fantastic travels, safe return home. You've been out for quite some days, so I'm pretty sure the family wants to see you. And I will see you in our next conversation. Everybody, have a wonderful rest of the week, and all things AI here. Registered, follow us, and let us know what you want to know more about.
Thank you, everybody. Until next time. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.